Hi, I'm Maggie. Thank you for stopping by Crafts the Charm today. I'm so glad you're here. So, Mr. Crafts the Charm was going to get rid of some jeans that he uses to mow the lawn because they're all ripped up in the back and therefore not wearable. But I was really excited to use those as crafting material, and I'm going to try to come up with some projects that I haven't seen people make with jeans before. Let's go have some fun. To start, I just need to disassemble the jeans, and you can see they have this huge rip in the back. What I wanted to do was preserve as much of the jeans as I could. So for example, I want to preserve the pockets, I want to preserve the little label, and I thought I would like to preserve the waistband with the belt loops hanging off of it. So the first thing I worked on was removing the waistband. And I'll be honest, this entire disassembly was not easy. These jeans are really well assembled. And you can see I have a little bowl there. That's for small pieces, but it's also for any threads that I remove. I do have an idea for using the threads in the future. And you'll notice when I'm doing a sewing craft or other craft that uses any kind of fabric or even jute twine, I actually save all of the little extra pieces, any bits that I cut off, all pieces of fabric I save because I think at a minimum I could use them for fiber fill or mix them in with fiber fill and use them to stuff a pillow or something else. But ideally I will have other project ideas for them. I only unseamed one leg. I have a lot of these jeans left even after my 3 projects, and I am excited to do something else with them. I love the different colors of the jeans. I love where the seams were, how dark they are, and I'm looking forward to incorporating that difference in color into the projects. I cut the hem off the bottom of the leg that I unseamed, and so now I have this nice straight leg, and it's got some dark fabric where the seam was, and it's also got some dark fabric where the pocket was. And what I'm going to do is cut some long strips about a ½ inch wide from this leg. For the first project, I'm going to make a coil basket. So what I have here is this hyper tough twisted sisal rope, which I bought at Walmart. It's around between $5 and $6, so it's an inexpensive material to use for a basket. The only issue is that it does have, bits of sisal that stick off of it, so I do have to trim those as I go, otherwise they'll come through the coil basket and poke out, and they are a little sharp. I'm going to begin the bottom of the basket with this charcoal tweed yarn, which I bought at the Dollar Tree. And the 2 tools that I use when I'm making a coil basket, besides scissors, are a paper clip, which I have unbent except for one little hook at the end, and this is a large paper clip. And I also sometimes use a yarn needle. So to start, cut a length of the yarn about 50 or 60 inches long, and you're going to need a lot of these because we're going to use one up and then start with another. Because it's very hard to cover the end of this, I actually have a little piece of craft paper here, which is a dark gray color, and I'm going to put that over the end of the sisal. Begin by laying a little end of the yarn along the sisal rope, and then wrap around the rope and the yarn away from yourself, making sure that you completely cover the sisal. Once you've wrapped enough that you can bend the sisal over on itself, leaving a little loop or a little hole in the middle, then do that and wrap around both your uncovered sisal and the end of that to hold it together. And then continue wrapping away from yourself. Once you've wrapped enough that you can bend that over and it's even with your little hole, then you're going to start the process of connecting your current piece of sisal that you're wrapping with the prior coil. So to do that, bring the yarn up towards yourself, so between the coil that you're currently wrapping and the old coil, and then poke your paperclip tool up through, in this case, the hole, grab that yarn, pull it all the way through, and then bring it back up between the two coils again and begin wrapping again away from yourself. Now you're going to begin that process of joining coils. So choose a number of wraps, such as 10 to 15. I would say go closer to 10. Wrap 10 times, and then repeat that process. Pull the yarn up between your current coil and the prior coil, slide the hook between the two coils and grab that yarn and pull it through, and then bring it back up and start wrapping again. When you run out of your yarn, cut yourself a new piece of yarn, lay the new piece of yarn along the sisal along with the end of the old piece of yarn, and just begin wrapping again. Now I only want this charcoal colored yarn for the bottom of my basket. So I made a bottom of the basket that is about 5 inches in diameter, and I brought one coil up to begin the sides of the basket. Now I'm going to stop wrapping with my yarn and start wrapping with my strips of jeans. But to begin, I'm going to bring some yarn along with me. So I will hold that against the sisal and wrap the jeans over it, because I'm going to use the yarn to attach to the bottom of the basket, which is wrapped with yarn. That way you won't see where I'm attaching. And so follow the same process with the jeans that you followed with the yarn. Wrap them away from yourself, and once you've done just a few wraps, because the jeans are wider, of course, than the yarn, then use the yarn that you've brought along with you to attach to the coil below. And once you go completely around, and now you have jeans over jeans, you can use the jeans to attach to the coil below, and you no longer need to bring the yarn along with you. The shape of your basket will be determined by how much you overlap your coils. So if you overlap them a lot, you'll get a fairly straight-sided basket. If you overlap them less, you'll get a more gradual basket. Now, the look that I wanted for this basket was sort of jeans with a really chunky white sweater on top. So after I had 4 rows of coils with jeans material, I switched to this wonderful Lion brand respun thick and quick yarn, and the color is whipped cream. I picked this up at JoAnn's and I just really love it. I looked at all of their yarns and this was the one that had the look I wanted. And so to do this, we're going to do it the same way we started with the jeans. We're going to bring some jeans along with us as we begin with the whipped cream yarn, so that we can use the jeans to attach to the coil below. And then once we have a complete row of the yarn, we no longer need to bring the jeans with us, and we can continue with just the yarn. So once I had 4 coils with the yarn, I decided that was about how tall I wanted the basket to be. And I cut off the sisal, try to give it a little bit of a taper when you do that, and then wrap around the bottom coil, or the coil below the end of your sisal and the end of your sisal until it's completely covered, and then slide that yarn under the wrappings that you've done and trim it off. This is the only part where I sometimes find it a little bit easier to use a yarn needle than to use the tool made out of the paperclip. Now, I thought it would be fun to reuse part of the tag from the jeans, which is like a little leather tag, and put that on the basket. So I didn't know if this would work or not, but I printed out in reverse the word "crafts the charm" in a font that I felt worked for this project. And I used Mod Podge to apply it to the back side of the tag, because the front side has the brand of the jeans on it. And the back side is soft. It feels more like suede. So I really wasn't sure if this would work or not, but I thought, hey, it's worth a try. So I cut out the word crafts the charm, again it's in reverse, and I applied regular matte Mod Podge to that, and then pressed it down hard onto the leather. I then let that sit for 24 hours, and then I just wet the paper, wet my finger, and rubbed the paper off. And I apologize, I cannot find footage of that. It came out pretty well. It's black, so it's difficult to see against the leather, and I considered painting over it with a white paint pen, but I thought that subtle look was fine with me. So then I just cut that, so it's just a little thin sliver, and it still has needle holes in it from where it was sewn onto the jeans. So those are at the top. So I found a very tiny needle that would fit through those needle holes, and then I used some brown thread and I just hand sewed it to the top of my basket. And here's the finished basket. For the second project, we're going to use these ruler sticks. They're paint stirrer sticks, which I picked up at Home Depot. You can get them in the paint section, and they come in different sizes. These are the smallest ones, and they come 10 to a package. So what I'm going to do is make some little frames out of these. And I originally thought I would make 8-inch frames, but when I actually had the paint sticks in my hand, I decided that they're really too thin to make an 8-inch frame. I just felt like they wouldn't look substantial enough. So I decided to make 6-inch frames with these, and these are sort of shadow box frames, so they're going to have a little bit of depth. Now you can buy frames like this at the Dollar Tree, so you could certainly buy a frame and do this project. But I wanted to make my own. I wanted them to be wood. And again, I wanted them to be my own size, but I think 6 inches is probably the size of the shadow box frames you can buy at the Dollar Tree anyway. And I considered mitering them at first, and then I thought that this wood was just too difficult to work with and too thin for me to miter them. So I'm just going to butt them against each other. So I'm going to cut 2 of them to be 6 inches long, and those will be on the outside of the box. And then I'm going to subtract the width of 2 of those from 6 inches to make the other 2, and those will be on the inside of the box, and that way we'll have a 6-inch by 6-inch square box. Once I had those pieces, I sanded the ends of them, and then I was originally thinking I would use these little squares from the Dollar Tree in the corners of the box, but they're too tall, and I felt that would raise the piece that I'm going to inset too much. So what I ended up doing was cutting triangles from the leftover pieces of wood that I used to make the sides. And so that was relatively easy. I just cut 45-degree angles across the end of the paint sticks. Assuming the paint sticks are straight, this made for correct cuts. And I sanded those. So to assemble this, I just used Gorilla wood glue. I suppose you could staple them in, but I didn't want any staples in my finished project, and the wood glue holds really well, so I just glued the pieces of wood together, and I glued the sides of the triangles and put them in the bottom, and then I used good old painter's tape in lieu of a clamp. I should mention that when I made the box, I did have the ruler side, because this is marked as a ruler, toward the inside, but I'm going to paint the box anyway, so it should completely cover that ruler. Now, before I paint it, I am going to trace it onto a thick piece of cardboard, because I am going to use this cardboard to make the inset for the frame. And I am going to make 4 of these, because I'm going to make some pieces that go together. Now the color I've chosen to paint these is Folk Art Home Decor chalk paint in white Adirondack. You could of course paint them any color you like, and I considered aging this by rubbing a little bit of brown around the edges, But ultimately I decided that I wanted this to be a crisp and clean looking project, so I left them just the white Adirondack. Now, where I had traced around the frame onto the piece of cardboard, I now cut that piece of cardboard out, and I started making it a little bit larger than I thought it needed to be, and then just kept fitting it to the frame and trimming it down until it fit perfectly within the frame. And again, I am making 4 of these. I'm only going to show you 1 frame and piece of cardboard, but for the insides I'll show you all 4 insides, and then you can see all 4 finished. Now, my idea for these pictures is to make nautical flags. When I was young, the preppier people I knew, their parents, used nautical flags for initials on their cars. They were like little magnets, I guess. So you could choose nautical flags, which are initials that are meaningful to you. I chose flags that had shapes that I thought would look well together. So I didn't pick any letters that had particular meaning to me. I just picked ones where I liked the shapes. And what I'm going to make the different parts of the nautical flags out of is our jeans, of course. And then I have a canvas drop cloth, so I'm going to use some of that canvas drop cloth fabric. And then finally, I'm going to use some cork from the Dollar Tree. Dollar Tree has sheets of cork that are adhesive, and I'm going to use those for the 3rd color on my flags, which have 3 colors. So what I did was I measured out the flags that I wanted to make so that I got the proportions correct. A lot of them are split into 2 pieces or 3 pieces or 5 pieces. And so it was fairly easy. I just measured my piece of cardboard and then just divided that by 5 or 3 or 2, whatever I needed. And then I cut those pieces out of a thinner cardboard, because what I'm going to do is wrap and glue the fabric around the thinner cardboard and then glue that to the thicker cardboard. I'm doing this because the cork has a little bit of depth, more depth than the fabric. So I thought if I wrap the fabric around some cardboard, that will give it a similar depth to the cork. The cork I will not put on these thinner pieces of cardboard. So my first flag is Alpha, and Alpha has a triangular shape cut out of the side, but I'm not going to have that empty. That's where I'm going to put the cork. So my Alpha flag is going to have 3 components. The largest component is the one in the middle, and I'm going to use the canvas drop cloth for that. And I just cut the piece out of cardboard and then laid it over the canvas drop cloth, cut around it, and then the tricky part is where it's pointy. And I found the best way to do the pointy parts is to cut straight across, but not right at the point, just a little bit past the point, and this way you don't get a lot of overlap on the back. And then I just used white glue. I wrapped everything over on the back, glued it down with the white glue, and then also held it in place with some masking tape. This is all going to get glued to that thicker piece of cardboard, the corrugated cardboard, anyway, so you're not going to see it. Then I cut the triangle shape out of the cork, and I covered the straight piece on the left side with my jeans fabric. Once the pieces were all done, I used white glue to glue them to the piece of corrugated cardboard. With the cork, it does have that adhesive backing. I removed the paper and pressed it down onto the cardboard with some glue in addition to the adhesive backing. And then I turned that upside down and put a heavy book on it to allow it to dry. My second letter is Charlie, which is 5 stripes. I'm going to use cork for the stripe in the middle, and then there will be 2 stripes made out of the jeans fabric and 2 stripes made out of the drop cloth. With the jeans fabric, when you have multiple stripes with the jeans fabric on a flag, I recommend making sure you're using the same side, so for example the outside of the jeans fabric, and that it's running in the same direction. And with this one, when I made my fabric stripes, they ended up being a little bit too wide, but that wasn't a big problem because I could just make that cork stripe in the middle a little bit more narrow. And I think this might be one of my favorite flags. My third flag is Foxtrot, and again, I just loved the way this one looked. So I made a diamond for the middle out of the canvas drop cloth, and then for the triangles on the sides, I used my jeans fabric. And again, make sure your fabric is running in the same direction on your triangles, or I think it will look a little weird. My final flag is the very simple kilo, or it could be echo. It's just two colors, so I just used the jeans for one stripe and the canvas drop cloth for the other stripe. And it's kilo if they're vertical, and it's echo if they're horizontal. And here are the finished flags. I do love the way they came out. And for my final project, we're going to begin with this jute rope or nautical rope from the Dollar Tree. And I believe this is the thinner rope. And we're basically going to make a pot holder here, although the final product isn't a pot holder. But if you ever had one of those plastic looms as a child, that's basically what we're going to do, but we don't have a plastic loom. So what I did was I used a thick piece of corrugated cardboard and some straight pins, and I just made rows of my rope just by bending it at the ends that were about 6 inches long. So the whole thing, when I'm done with coiling or folding the rope, is going to be 6 inches by 6 inches. And once I have that all set up and secure, I am going to weave a combination of my jeans and that lovely white yarn from before, just over, under on this loom, I guess, that I've made, or this warp that I've made out of the nautical rope. So just going to go from one end until we can't go any further on the other. And the trick here is just to be nice and tidy. And I did use my needle nose pliers in a couple of places just to pull the jeans along the rope, because there was a lot of friction there, to make it nice and straight. But I loved the combination of these colors together. The combination is very similar to the combination of colors in the nautical flags. And I'm not trying to weave the ends under or anything at this time. I'm just leaving them. And when I ran out of a jeans strip and yarn, I just started with a new one. I was just cutting the yarn to be the same length as the jeans strip that I was working with. Once I got near the end and I felt like I wouldn't be able to weave any longer with it pinned down to the board, what I did was I sewed the end together. So I took some thread that was the same color as the rope, and I basically just pushed it through the rope, so through each piece of rope that was next to the fold that was next to it. And I did tie a knot at each juncture, but basically just sewed that end together. And one thing that I did now that I could have done at the start was I whipped both ends of the rope. So you've probably seen me do the whipping technique before. I'll include a link to it here if you want to see it in a little bit more detail. But basically I take a piece of jute, make a loop with it, and wrap around that loop over the end of the rope, and then put the end through the end of the loop and pull tight. It ends up pulling the the end of the rope under the wrapping that I did and then cut it off. And it just is a way to finish off the end of rope. And I would have done that when I started. I was afraid that it would make the ends bulky and difficult to weave over, but it wouldn't have done that. So it might have been better to do it at the start. Once I had sewed up the end, I was able to pull the pins out, and then I just continued weaving to the end. And then once I had finished weaving to the end, I did the same thing with the other end, the end where I started. I pulled up the pins and sewed the ends together. It's much easier to weave this if at least one end is pinned down. So I wouldn't start this project by sewing the ends together. I would leave it pinned for as long as possible. Once I had the weaving completely finished and it was sewn together on the ends, I'll say I cheated and I just used fabric glue to finish off any place where I had started or ended a piece of yarn or jeans. So I just cut them so that I could tuck them in between two pieces of the rope, and then used some of this fabric glue, it's Aleen's fabric glue, to glue the pieces together. And you can see I didn't quite finish here. I did it in 2 stages because in one place I had wanted to pin the jeans down, and so I wasn't going to be able to do the other side. So after that dried, I just unpinned it and finished off the last little pieces that I hadn't finished here. Now you certainly could leave this like this, or you could wrap something, some kind of trim around the edges of it. What I thought was I would make a sort of a trinket box out of it, and so I used my canvas drop cloth and I got that ironed nice and flat, and then I cut a strip of this that I could put around my, I'm going to call it weaving, around my weaving. So this strip, I wanted to have a 1-inch overlap on the bottom and then a 1-inch side. So this strip is 4 inches. I cut a 4-inch strip and then I folded the sides in. So I had 2 inches by 2 inches, but a double width of fabric, and ironed it down. I did not think I needed to sew it. I didn't need to sew it. I thought the ironing would be sufficient to hold it in the shape that I wanted. So once I had that nice 4-inch strip, I really didn't want a seam, so I used the Aleen's fabric glue again to glue it down to one side. And I did these weird corners and really didn't like the corners, but this is going to be the bottom of the little box anyway. If you were doing more of a trivet, you could finish off both sides the way that I'm finishing this off. But I think I would do just more of a straight fold so that you have what looks like a mitre at the corners instead of this weird thing that I did. For some reason I thought that looked better than a mitre, but I think I'm wrong. So I just did this on a piece of corrugated cardboard, glued it, and pinned into the cardboard to hold that in place while the glue dried. So once that had dried, on the other side, I just glued the 2 ends of the drop cloth together with the Aleen's fabric glue. And then for the sides of this little trinket basket, I'm using the cork again. So I just measured pieces of cork to put inside and then used the adhesive backing on the cork to adhere them to the drop cloth. To get this right, I did use pieces of cardboard at first to get the right size for the cork, so I wouldn't make mistakes cutting the cork. And then finally, I have this macrame cord, which I got at the Dollar Tree, but you can get this anywhere. And I thought that I needed just something to finish off the top of this. So I figured out what size I needed to go all the way around the top and then cut it. And then I whipped the 2 ends of it together to give it a nice finish. So just attach them together with a tiny piece of masking tape. And then I used some white string, which I had bought at the Dollar Tree, to whip them together because it's a similar color. So just cut a length of that, make a loop over the piece of masking tape and extend a little bit on either side of that, and then wrap towards the bend in the loop around the 2 pieces and the loop until you get to the end of the loop, put the string through the loop and then pull from the other side to get it to go under the wrapping, and then trim. And then I used the Aleen's fabric glue to glue that down to the top with a little bit of painter's tape to hold it in place while the glue dried. And here's the final trinket tray.
So what did you think of our coastal project made from old jeans? Please tell me in the comments, especially if you had a favorite project. When I set out to make something with the old jeans, I didn't have a coastal theme in mind. That's just the direction I ended up going with these 3 crafts. But I do have other ideas for other themes and just non-themed crafts with the jeans, and I do have lots of jean left, so I can't wait to do more projects with those. I think that my favorite might have been these little flag signs, just because I felt like they came out really nicely and I loved the way that they looked, but I really did like all of the projects. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy this sort of content, please subscribe to Crafts the Charm. Thank you for spending time with me today. Take care.